the CRJ 900 Canada flight update at LaGuardia. Let's talk about the pilots, the controllers, and the driver. We're going to save the driver for last. The pilots. I went to school on the CRJ 900 back in the 90s. To get your license back in the 80s and fly for an airline like that, you had to go to school to get your private, commercial, multi. Then you had the flight instructor run up hours. Then you had to fly every single plane you could to get the hours, just to get on with somebody like that. Then you didn't make any money. And you had to pay for your own training. Nowadays, it took 3, 4, 5 years to get to the point to be able to get in a CRJ 200, 700, 900. Nowadays, you can go to a special bank and borrow $100,000 and go to school for a whole year and just do everything. Get out of that school, flight instruct for a couple of months, get some hours up, and you can get a job, one of those jobs like that. You're not going to be the captain. You got to fly 1,000 hours in the right seat before you can even think about being a captain. What I'm saying is, those two young pilots spent a lot of money and worked very hard to get where they are. Now, the young co-pilot that was flying, they can only fly 1,000 hours a year. They're going to fly those guys like crazy. They're going to get 1,000 hours in 10 months. So in 10 months, they can't fly anymore until the calendar 12 months is up. So after that co-pilot gets 1,000 hours in the right seat, then if the pilot pool is moving, he can go and be a captain and get in the left seat. Then he can fly 2 years in the left seat. Then he's got 3,000 hours in a CRJ jet. He can go get a job in a 737. So what I'm saying is, those guys worked very hard. 80% of the people that are going to take a flying lesson are not going to come back after 10 hours. So for those two young men to make it through flight school, then get on with the airlines. Getting on with the airlines is not easy. Not everybody gets on with the airlines. You got to be smart. You got to pass the interview. Then you got to go to school. The school to fly that CRJ is like 6 weeks. It's not an easy school. You got to be smart. You got to be able to take in knowledge quickly. They call it drinking from the fire hose. Those two young men were very intelligent, hardworking, dedicated men. You don't get to that point unless you're smart and hardworking and dedicated. Now, when they go to school on that airplane, you got to keep up in the school. If you don't keep up, they kick you out. If you don't pass the check ride, then they kick you out. Those guys studied, worked hard, were dedicated. And now we've lost them. When they're flying that plane and they're 10 miles out, and center sends them over to the tower, and they say LaGuardia Tower, Jazz Flight 1234, with you, ILS runway 4. And the tower comes back and says, Jazz 1234, you're clear to land. ILS runway 4. Now they're expecting the runway to be clear and they can land. That's what they're expecting. They can't stop on a dime. At that point, once they touch their wheels down, then the thrust reversers come out, the spoilers come out. They're decelerating. If that truck would have pulled out on the other end of the runway, they might have had time to stow everything, get some speed back up and go around. But they're in a very difficult situation. Like I said before, they're landing at an angle like this. They're landed at an angle like this. You land the jet twice. You land the mains first, then you bring that nose down real slow. By the time they got that nose down, they probably didn't have but a second or two to react. So I'm just heartbroken for those pilots, you know. Let's talk about the guy in the tower. I believe the curfew is midnight. I don't think anybody else can land there at midnight. Now, I may be wrong about that. I've been in and out of there before, but that's during the day. And if what they're saying is true, and there's only 2 people in that tower, and one guy was handling the ground, the tower, and the clearance delivery. So he's doing 3 jobs. There's only 2 runways there. There's really 4 runways, but there's really only 2 active runways. It's not like Memphis where you got 3 runways, 4 runways, and everybody's, you know, I'm not saying that's an easy airport, but it's easier than some airports. The problem is you got JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, Tetersboro, all right there together. That is the most congested airspace in the whole United States. So the controller shouldn't have been in the tower by himself. There was 2 people in the tower. They said one guy's doing paperwork and he's doing everything. So he has an emergency he's having to deal with. He needs some help in the tower. You know, putting one guy up there like that and making him do everything, that's not fair to him. Now, that controller school, you got to be smart to be a pilot. You got to be really smart to be a controller. And you got to even be smarter to be a mechanic. The mechanic is the smartest of everybody. But you're asking too much of that guy in the tower to do the ground, the landing flights, coordinate the other flights, and they said he's doing clearance delivery. What is clearance delivery? Well, say we're sitting in our Cessna 172 at LaGuardia and we want to go to Memphis. We don't just call up and say, we want to go to Memphis. You have to file a flight plan, whether it be VFR or IFR. And then when you get your flight plan filed, you got to go out there and get in the plane. Or you could do it on the ground. You call clearance delivery. You say, clearance delivery, Cessna 1234. We're on the ground on LaGuardia. We want to go IFR, 10,000 feet, Mike, Echo, Mike. And then he's going to read back, and he's got to coordinate this. He's going to say, Cessna 1234, expect runway 4. After departure, climb and maintain 10,000 feet. Your heading will be 270. Departure clearance will be 125.8, squawk 4732. He's got a lot to do. He's watching planes move on the ground. He's got an emergency. He's got planes landing. He's got guys in a fire truck. Now he's thinking in his brain, these guys in the fire truck, those are firemen. Do I have to babysit them? Do I? They're sitting on the edge of the runway. There's red lights whoosh, 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 at that taxiway. Not every airport has it, but LaGuardia has it. And the red lights trump everything. It doesn't matter what the controller says. If the controller says there are no planes in the air anywhere within 100 miles of here, you can drive your fire truck across the runway. But if those lights are going whoosh, whoosh, right in front of his truck, red lights, whoosh, whoosh, on the ground flashing, the red lights have control over what the controller says. He has to say to the controller, Tower, we have conflicting report. The red safety lights are flashing that says we cannot enter to the runway. he shouldn't have pulled on the runway with the lights flashing, you know. But we're going to get to him in a minute. We're going to save him for last. The controller, I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for him. You don't just call the airport and say, I want to be an air traffic controller and I want to work in the tower. No. You got to be smart. You got to be able to think. You got to be able to do math quickly. You got to apply for school. You got to pass to even say you can go to school. That school is a difficult school. I think it's 36 weeks. It's very difficult. When you graduate, they don't say, okay, report to LaGuardia Tower in the morning. No. You have to go to a lesser, out-of-the-way airport and work under people and work up to that. To work in the LaGuardia Tower, that guy was no dummy. He was smart. He's got a lot of experience. But to ask him to do everything, you know, you're asking too much of a person. I do not understand why we don't have more controllers in the tower. The guy doing the paperwork, because they all want to go home at 12, he should have been helping out, especially when there's an emergency. Now, I wasn't in the tower, and I don't know everything that happened, but I just know what's been reported. Now, let me say this. I've said it a million times. Don't let the controllers, the passengers, the boss, or the airplane rush you. If I did every single thing a controller told me in my 40 years of flying, I would have ran into 10 airplanes. Numerous times they've said, Cessna 1234, taxi from the ramp, left on Echo, right on Alpha. And I've had to say, excuse me, ground, but there is a FedEx MD-11 in front of me, and I can't turn on there. Cessna 123, hold short, give way to the MD-11. You have to have common sense. When they tell you something, you got to look out the window and calculate it for yourself. Most jets, if they're being flown properly, you got one guy taxiing looking out the window, and the other guy's on the iPad looking. And these days, with the modern technology, you can look on your iPad and see yourself moving, because some of these taxi instructions, some of these big airports are very complicated. You got to write it down. Now, if you fly the same airport every day and you got it memorized, it's not as difficult. But when you're going, all these different airports, construction, repairing the taxiways, traffic, you know, you got other guys make a mistake. You get one guy make a mistake, make a wrong turn, then everything's messed up. So you have to use some common sense and pay attention to what the controller tells you when you're taxiing. If I would have done every single thing the controller said without looking, I'd have hit 5 airplanes. And if you run into one airplane when you're taxiing, your career is pretty much over. So the controllers are busy. Now, the controllers up north, they ain't always nice like the controllers down south, because they're busy and they have to deal with foreigners and students and young pilots, and you know, it's not an easy job. The controller was focusing on another plane. See, one of the problems at these big airports, you got 6 entities. You got the Port Authority, you got the Airport Authority, you got the Airport Police, you got the tower. You know, everybody wants to be the king. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. You know, they're trying to find a gate for an airplane with smoke. Now, the smoke and the smell is they tried to take off twice and they got hot brakes, and the hot brakes is going into the air conditioning system, and it's making some people sick. They got to get to a gate. Everybody's trying to get them to the gate. The tower, the ground, you got to call the company, you got to do this, you got to have 2 marshalers. The work ethic in America is just, I hate to go to Charlotte. I hate. There's too many planes, too many runways. You go to Charlotte, you're going to get 30 minutes out, and they're going to make you whole. You ever notice when you go to Charlotte and you're looking out the window? You know, I've seen that same farm 10 times now, because you're doing a circle. You're doing a holding pattern. Then you got to land. They never land you near your gate. They land you somewhere else. Then you got to taxi 30 minutes. It's insane. Then you get to the gate and you're just sitting there. And you're like, why are we sitting here? There's the gate. Why are we sitting here 10 minutes? The pilot cannot pull up to the gate unless there's a marshaller on each wing. They're waiting on the marshaller. And after 10 minutes, you see a guy come walking up like this right here. You know, it's very frustrating. The airline systems is like the Greyhound bus system. Everybody wants to fly for $39. They want a direct flight. You know, people come to the flight drunk in their pajamas, fighting. It's just bad. So one of the problems at LaGuardia, there's too many people in charge. Everybody's in charge and nobody's in charge. So this poor guy in the tower with the other guy doing paperwork's not even helping him. From what I've heard, he's dealing with an emergency. He's got to think the fire trucks need to get to the emergency. If they would have went across that runway quick the first time, they'd probably been okay. Probably still the plane would have had to do a go around, but he's just overworked. He's doing too much. Okay? It takes a long time to work in the tower at LaGuardia. You got to move up. It probably took him 10 years to move up to that. And they probably said, put so-and-so in the tower because we know he can do the job of 3 people. And that guy probably can. Now, when he gets off work, his brain, he's tired. He wants to go home and go to sleep. I feel sorry for the controller. Is the controller at fault? Yes. Is the chief duty controller in charge that night who doesn't have enough people in the tower at fault? Yes. I don't know why we can't get controllers. That's another video. Let's talk about that driver. I got a friend in Memphis that's a fireman. He applied to be a Memphis Fire Department, I think 3 or 5 years. It took him 3 or 5 years just to get on. Just to get on. Now, once he gets on, he is the lowest person. He's riding on the back of the truck, you know. Now, he has to take a class. How to pump the water. How to turn on the pump. How to drive the little truck. How to drive the bigger truck. How to do the aerial truck. I think it took him 10 years to do every single task. He can drive every truck, every pumper, work every piece of equipment. He has done every... Boy, this gets me mad. He has done every single progression he can do. He's at the top of the top. He can drive any truck. He can do anything. I taught a guy to fly. There was a paramedic. Now, he started off at the bottom. He started off at the worst fire department. He says all night long, all he does is go to people's houses with a headache. And if in Memphis, if you call the ambulance has to go. And if you want to go to the hospital, they're going to take you to the hospital. He said most of his runs is going and picking up people with a headache and taking them to the hospital. I asked him, I said, have you ever delivered a baby? He said, well, Glenn, I delivered 19 babies. In the house, out of the house, in the driveway, in the ambulance, getting out of the ambulance, getting in the ambulance. He says, yeah, I've delivered 19 babies. So he had to start off at the worst fire station and move up. It's like a pilot. If you got 5,000 pilots, the guy with the seniority number in the top 10, he don't fly but 10 times a month. The guy at the bottom, he's flying 25 times a month. He's flying Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's. As these guys retire and he moves up, then you get a better schedule. Same with the fire department, same with the controllers. To get on at the fire department, it's not easy. to get on and move up and pass everything, it takes 10 years. I got another guy I taught to fly. He's a paramedic, and he's a paramedic at the Memphis airport. Now, you don't call out there and say, I want to go to be a paramedic at the Memphis airport. No, that's the gravy job. Everybody wants that job. Why? Because they don't do nothing. They may go 3 weeks and never get in the truck. You know, once a week they say, let's go crank the truck up and charge the battery, drive around the airport. You know, everybody wants that job. You got all these firemen in Memphis. You may, I don't know, 8,000 firemen. There's probably only 100 that can work at the airport. Everybody wants to work at the airport. It's more money, it's safer, and it's less work. Now, if there's a big airplane crash, then it's different. That's different. You got to go to the airplane crash and put the fire out. He did the same thing. It took him 25 years to make it to the airport. He can do every job. He can drive every truck. Of course, he's a paramedic, so he really ain't no dummy. It took him years to get to that job. Why did I say all this? If you want to drive the fire truck at LaGuardia Airport, you don't call out there and say, hey, I want to drive the fire truck at the airport. Can I come fill out an application? No. You have to be a fireman somewhere. Probably 10, 15 years. And you probably got to know somebody. To get that job, you probably got to know somebody. Now, when you get that job, you ain't going to be in the fire truck day one. You're going to have to go class after class, more classes, more training, safety training. You're going to have to know everything about that fire truck to move up to be the driver. They don't let just anybody be the driver. You're going to have training to be the driver. You're at one of the busiest airports in the United States, and you're going to drive this big green truck. You get in the truck, you crank it, you look at the gas and the oil, you walked around, made sure the tires were okay, you got in the truck, you said, I can drive the truck today, I'm not drunk, I'm not sleepy, I'm going to drive the truck today. So you got to know, you know, my training, I've been trained to drive this truck safely. I've been trained to I'm listening to this, guys. Truck 1 and company, we went across runway 4. You know, you gotta be on super duper wobber slobber high alert when you get in that truck. Before you leave that fire station, I'm in this big truck and I'm fixing to go to a fire and I'm gonna cross some runways and drive across this airport. You got to know when you get to that runway, if those red lights are flashing from your training, that you got to say, Tower, I know you've cleared us across the runway, but the active runway red lights are flashing. It doesn't matter what the guy in the tower says. If those red lights are flashing, and you can see it on the video, they're flashing. The red lights trump what the tower guy tells you. Number 2, you got to say, this is what I say before I take off on any runway. I don't care if it's at LaGuardia, JFK, Memphis, or West Memphis. This is what I do. And I tell my students, don't get on that runway until you say this. Nobody's coming down the runway. Nobody's on final. Nobody's on base. Nobody's on downwind. Nobody's coming the opposite way. Then I do it a second time. Numerous times I go out there early in the morning and there's deer and coyotes on the runway. So I had to get in my truck. I got to scare off the deer and the coyote because I don't really want to hit a deer or a coyote when I'm taking off. Now, do I just get in my truck and drive them down the runway? No. I get on the radio and I'm listening if I hear any planes coming. And then I don't even get on that runway. I get on the taxiway and drive down there and blow my horn, scream and holler, and it runs the deer and the coyotes off the runway. I don't just pull out on the runway. Before you pull out on that runway, number 1, you got to be, that guy has had training. How much training do you need to know not to pull on a 7,000 foot long runway where airplanes are landing. When you pull out on a runway, you got to look left. How do you not see a CRJ 900? That's a big airplane with a lot of lights coming down the runway. I worked at FedEx in the hub in the 90s on the ground. We used to sit there and watch them airplanes. We watched so many airplanes, you could tell by the lights what kind of airplane it was. I mean, 2 lights on the wing and 2 lights on the gear, it's a DC-10. 2 lights on the wing, 1 light on the tail, it's a 757. I don't know if that's accurate anymore. That was 40 years ago. But if you're at the fire station at LaGuardia, you should know what an airplane looks like that's landing coming down the runway. You should know that those red lights flashing mean under no circumstances do you cross those red lights. Same thing with an airplane. Those lights are not only for a vehicle, they're for an airplane. There is a hold short line there. If you let the nose of your airplane penetrate that hold short line, you can be in big trouble. Big trouble. You have got to know that you got to look both ways 3, 4, or 5 times. And you got to ask your passenger, do you see anything? Is it clear? The training that those guys have, and they've sat in class for hours watching videos. Okay, if you come to the runway and the red active runway lights are flashing, that has the most important, that's more important than what the controller tells you. The procedure is, if the red lights are flashing and the controller says it's okay to cross, you query the controller. You don't just say, oh, okay, let's go across. I don't understand how you get to that point in your career as a firefighter, moving up, and get in a truck and pull up to a runway with the red lights flashing, and there's a big giant jet, and you don't see it, you just pull out in front of it. The controller said, truck 1, stop, truck 1, stop. You got to be listening for that. You can't be talking. You can't have the radio on. You got to be listening to that radio. I know the firemen don't listen to the radio as much as a pilot. You fly around, you go from Miami to LaGuardia, and you're going to hear the radio. And your brain gets trained to pick out information. Information that doesn't matter gets kind of pushed to the side. But when you hear jazz 1, 2, 3, 4, your brain picks that up and they tell you something. Because you get up there, it's rapid fire. You get up there with JFK and LaGuardia and Tetersboro, it's rapid fire. Jazz 1, 2, 3, 4, turn right, climb and maintain 3,000. FedEx 8127, turn left, descend down to 8,000. It's rapid fire. You got to jump in there and you got to be listening. Now, the pilots are more apt to understand that in their brain, and the fire truck guy, he's not. But still, when you get in that fire truck, you got to be listening for fire truck 1. He told him to cross, and then he told him to stop. Fire 1, stop. He just pulled right on out. You got to have a keen ear. First, you got to look and see if a big jet's coming down the runway. Second, you got to be listening. If he would have hit them brakes when he said, stop, truck 1, stop, he's got 5 other fire trucks, I don't know, a couple of other fire trucks behind him. It's heartbreaking. I mean, I don't even want to think about it. I mean, it's 2 guys are gone. 2 people are dead. I mean, what do we need to do? Do we need to get 2 dump trucks full of rocks and then if somebody ignores the red light, just dump the rocks? Do we need to get 10 girls out there with flags saying stop, stop? Is that what we need to do? They said, well, the transponder wasn't working in the truck. Do we need a transponder? Can we not use common sense and look at a red light flashing and look to the left, look to the right, look to the left to make sure nobody's coming? Who do I blame? Who do I blame? I'm going to tell you, everything rises and falls on leadership. Everybody want to blame everybody. Everybody want to blame everybody. The person in charge of manning the tower should be fired. The guy driving the truck and his passenger that was in the seat with him should be fired. The chief fire head on duty that night should be fired. They won't. This is America. Everybody gets promoted. Oh, promote them, promote them. That's the reality of flying. The controllers are overworked. The pilots did everything right. The pilots did everything right. They're the losers. The pilots are dependent on the people in the tower. When they say you're cleared to land, that it's clear for them to land. The guy in the tower, he told the fire truck to stop. He told him to go, but then he did tell him to stop. He's working another emergency. He can't do 2 emergencies at once and handle everything else. You're asking too much of the guy. I'm heartbroken for that guy. Did he make a mistake? Yes. But his mistake is different than pulling a great big steel truck out in the front of an airplane. I cannot compute that in my 63-year-old brain, soon to be 64. I just can't. How can that be? How do you do that? All your training and all the safety things, they're going to blame me. I didn't have a transponder in the truck. You got a driver in a truck. It's his responsibility. An airplane, you got to know where the nose of that airplane is going to be 15 minutes before it gets there. A fire truck, you got to know 10 seconds. This is not the first incident of this happening at that airport. Okay. Those are my thoughts from my 40 years. Once again, you have to pay attention and query when the controller tells you something. Like I said, just at Memphis Airport alone, if I would have done everything to the T the controller told me, I'd have hit 5 airplanes. And if you hit an airplane, you run, I'm not talking about in the air, I'm talking on the ground. If you hit an airplane with another airplane, you're going to tear the airplane up and you might kill yourself because you might catch the airplane on fire. So you got to use common sense when the controller tells you something. Even in the air, you know. You'll have a controller in the air, they'll say, turn left 270, descend and maintain 10,000. Well, there's a thunderstorm there, unable due to weather. Okay. Those are my thoughts. My heart goes out to the family of those pilots. And that controller, he's got to live with that. And the fire truck guy, he's going to have to live with that the rest of his life. I'll look for some other updates. If I see one, I'll make it. It upsets me.